Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Explorer podcast. I'm your host, Mike Duffy, and I'm really excited to have a good friend and ex-work colleague, Jessie Chen, join us today. Jessie, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Mike, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, my friend.
Absolutely. And so, just by way of background, Jesse's 38. He's originally from New Jersey. He's now living in Mexico, and he is a psychedelic men's coach, which is exciting as heck to me. He is single. And he's most excited about boxing these days, and specifically the physicality from a learning standpoint, being from the mind and developing a different connection to the body. So it's a form of somatic therapy that I think is super groovy. He just got back from a trip in the Peruvian Amazon studying with the natives on extreme jungle survival training. We're gonna have to figure out how we weave that into the conversation. And probably the best way, I think, to really talk about happiness and growth in Jesse's story is to talk about trauma and how major life trauma has affected you and your growth. So, can you tell us about how trauma has affected you?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity. The way that I see it is there's really like a few major components to the story. And I think this is the truth for everyone, but not everyone's in the same place. But for me, there was this brutal before story. There's just this origin story that came through and certainly had its highlights. And I had a lot of success in my younger years, both in corporate and international activism. But below the surface was I was the son of an immigrant father, a hardline immigrant father, and a handicapped mother. My mom was sick for 18 years. I was a part-time caregiver. She was 12 years in a wheelchair, six paralyzed from the neck down. And I also dealt with the racial adversities and otherness and bullying of being different in my growth path. I made up for that in a lot of ways by being in leadership service positions in various organizations, ranging from the local level to the global level. But it was really the trauma of dealing with that really big weight of mom's illness that I think led to most of the struggles in my life. And just learning at 12 years old that your mom is going to die early in life is just a weight that really sits with you and sit with me and affected most of my life.
What, how did you cope with that? What were the stages you went through as you came to that realization and learned to live with it that your mom was going to die?
Yeah, at first it presented itself as an overachievement complex, as
Okay.
really wanting to succeed in everything that I could so that I could impress her before she died. And that's how it was sort of like, hey, dad's only home on the weekends. Mom is going to die soon. Let's go and achieve and conquer and dominate in these sorts of roles and these positions and all these awards and whatnot. And that was how I coped, I would say, through the teens and the early 20s. By the mid 20s, it was clear that I was starting to cope with alcohol and weed. And that was
Mm.
at a level that was more destructive than I would say constructive. It was definitely escapist. And so it showed up in my life. I was still in service, trying to help out, trying to make a difference in the world, trying to do a great thing. And but it was clear that it was starting to come at the cost of my health and of my relationships. I was single for a very long period of time, and I was because I just was not ready. I was not ready to open my heart to a woman when my own mother was dying, and I really struggled with that for a long time. I would say is I was just like, how could I abandon my mom during this time of her pain and her suffering and her drawn out death, really. And so I ignored relationships, opportunities, and I started to pull away from being engaged with the world as I mean, it's a whole story, but as my first business failed, and as my mom's health was really hitting the end there, and then we hit COVID, it was just like, okay, like this is just, this has just created the nightmare in my life where I've been gifted all these amazing, incredible opportunities that a lot of people would be really, really fortunate and really grateful to have. And I'm grateful certainly for what I had in my life for both corporate and outside corporate, but also being in this place where, man, I just feel like I lost out on many years of my life because of this illness and because of its impact on my family.
Knowing what you know now, how would you have navigated it differently?
Well, I certainly would have talked to a therapist or a coach a lot earlier in my life. Um,
Okay.
we
Yeah.
weren't there yet, like we weren't there yet, I think from a society standpoint, certainly from my family standpoint, we weren't there. Being open to support for mental health. I should have been seeing a therapist at 12 years old the minute we found out about mom's disease.
Okay.
Um, I would say that the higher edu well, both K through 12 and the education systems were not properly equipped, to no fault of their own, but were not properly equipped to really see what was under the covers of an overachievement complex. It was rewarded. In fact, there was a deep pain that I was trying to cover up for. Going through many years of singlehood, there was definitely a deep pain there that needed attention, and I did not have that. There was no older brother figure in my life. Dad was focused on mom's health and providing for our family, which I certainly am grateful for. No resentment, no regrets. But I would say if I could do one thing differently, it would have been seeking out help. And then when I started working with psychedelics, I was like, oh my God, I should have should have done this 20 years ago. It would have changed the entire course of my entire life, which is why I'm doing this work now.
So I want to get to psychedelics, but tell me more about how this trauma has affected your growth and your path now.
Yeah, I think that in terms of how the trauma has impacted my growth and my life path, I would say that I am just growing up now in my late 30s in a way that I think most people kind of grow up in their 20s, in their young to mid 20s. There's parts of my life, specifically relationships, but also in business, of recognizing that these patterns of being afraid to draw boundaries, these patterns of seeking out service to, or seeking out love through service rather than service for the sake of service, impacted me in a material way. I would say that it was something that led to me being single at 38 years old. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I recently started dating again in the last couple of years, but before that, lots of pain being, one of the classically lonely, depressed men out there, not in a relationship, and wondering what it was that I had done wrong. Having
Mm,
done all these things in the external world with all of the achievements, all of the corporate roles, and being like, what is it that I'm doing wrong? Why am
right.
I here? Am I not worthy? Am I not a valuable person?
Mm,
Like what is it that I've done wrong? I see plenty of examples of people who have, relationships that are just pieces of shit. And I'm like, I don't want to be a person like that. So what is it that I've done wrong? So here, I would say that trauma has been, a double-edged sword of me waking up to my own power and my own value and my own self-love, but also recognizing that there's lots of people out there who go through adversity and struggle. And I'm one of the fortunate ones who has been able to get help. And as a result of that, change my life and redirect my life for the better.
The key to life, it isn't money, it's happiness. And when you measure how happy you are, you actually become even more happy. Our friends at Gobundance, the tribe of millionaires, use a very specific tool to measure their happiness. It's called the Life Happiness Index. And you can have it too. Go over to gobundance.com/LHI and take your Life Happiness Index assessment. You'll rate yourself in multiple categories on exactly how happy you are and get a custom output for you specifically that you can use in developing whatever goals you have for your life. Gobundance is the tribe of healthy, wealthy, generous people who choose to live epic lives. And the tool Gobundance members use at the base of all of that is the Life Happiness Index. Get out there and grab life big.
Yeah, and you mentioned that a couple times. I think it's just so important, just this getting help. Maybe it's a cliche, but it's so difficult to navigate the world through the power of our own minds. One of my favorite lines from Seneca, my mind is an enemy and in ambush.
Mm,
And it's so difficult to see ourselves, and particularly when we're going through crises. So getting help through therapists, through coaches, through friends is so vitally important. One of the big themes for me these days is how to get deeper in those
hmm
friendships, in those relationships, um, particularly platonic friendships. And I like to quote Epicurus, one of my favorite of the Greek philosophers, and that was his primary theme was friendship. And he said of all the aspects of wisdom, happiness is the most important. Or, I'm sorry, friendship is the most important for happiness. And
hmm
he and his followers, they went deep. They supported each other. They talked about life's most important questions and challenges, and offered each other support and loving criticism. And I'm just fascinated by that, the ability to hold space for people, to create a safe space so that
Mm,
people feel that they can be vulnerable, and then the courage to be vulnerable.
yes.
And,
Yes.
particularly both of us coming out of a corporate career where showing your true colors was perhaps career suicide in some cases, where you had to so carefully, at least for me, modulate your appearance and what you
Yes.
said, that it's
Yes.
anathema to say I'm just going to say exactly what I feel. Oh my gosh, really? Not in this workplace. So I think, friendships are so vitally important, and having a sense of community. And you made a major life change. You went to Mexico. Did you know anyone when you got there?
No, I did not. Yeah, it was a big change.
So how have you built community? What's this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it comes from a couple levels. I really appreciate what you're saying here in terms of friendship being a driver to happiness. I mean, in terms of the origin story, I was fortunate to have a couple of really great, close, high vibrational friends, I'll use that term, who are just like men of extraordinary character and compassion,
Mm,
that would, from time to time hold space for me and with me. And that was something that I really depended on. And those people are very near and dear to my heart because of just their natural, authentic self being able to do that. It's really a vibration of leadership that's difficult to find, especially in corporate, where we lack a lot of people who are good listeners, let alone compassionate, understanding listeners. And so when I came to Mexico, the thing, that I was really focused on was like, well, how do I connect with the other gringos around here? Because my Spanish is a work in progress. How do I connect with these other, yuppie types, who, even if it's not young in age, it's young in heart, that are just looking to grow and continue to, explore life and what does
mm,
it mean to sit down and have a deep conversation and talk about the stuff that is real. I have a friend of mine, a friend who's 83 years old, and she's still as young as they can be, and she'll open up to me about what she's going through in terms of her aging process and how difficult it is for her to let go of things that she used to be able to do. I also have like a 25-year-old who it's the same thing. He's like just coming to terms with the fact that, hey, I no longer can do the things that I did when I was a teenager. And it's just like, it's a grief, right? That's all it is. It's just a grief of a loss of what was. And when you're in that place of talking about something that is actually bothering someone on a deep level, it creates a sense of connection and intimacy that I think the word intimacy sometimes is misinterpreted by a lot of people as romantic sexual intimacy, but like deep emotional spiritual connection with another being about their life journey and what they're challenged by and what they're going through. What is it like to go through a divorce? What is it like to go through life single? What is it like to go through, a year of celibacy? What is it like to go through, the loss of a job? What is it like to go through, your kids no longer want to, snuggle with you anymore, now that they're getting older? Like these are real connections. And it's far more interesting and far more human than anything that is shown on the evening news. And yet, most people are caught up in catching up to each other based on the political news of the day or whatever is capturing the zeitgeist's attention. So it's like, okay, let's connect with people on a human level. And so when I started connecting with people here on that level, it eventually led me to my men's group. And my men's group has been an enormous role in connecting with other guys who are on the growth path, who are on the conscious growth path, who want
Hmm.
to talk about the things that they're struggling with. And, some of these things are externally faced, like, romantic relationships, for example, or work relationships. Some of it's internal, like your relationship with your father, or your mother, or, like your siblings or whatever it is. And it's like, what does this bring up for me? It brings up these pains of not being really heard when I was younger, or not really feeling like I'm seen and in my power, and treated as an adult. And it's like, okay, well, what is that? And how do we provide that container, that reflective container, so that you can see in yourself the part that the rest of us can see. And that to me is a deeper level of
Mm.
connection, and it's very fulfilling to sit in circles like that and be there for others and also have others be there for you.
Yeah, you said so much there. First of all, men's groups, gender-based groups, and the support that we get from those. This podcast is sponsored by Gobundance, which has had a profound impact on my life. And you mentioned being with people that have a growth mindset, that are looking to go deep, are willing to talk about struggle, and developing the capacity to do that and to hold space and to enter that space. You also said towards the end, seeing the part that everyone else sees. And I that really hits me. I think our close friendships, when we reveal ourselves, can really be such a beautiful lens on who we really are and what our gifts are. And our minds are
Mm,
so complex and our inner critics are so predominant that it can be so difficult to get a clear picture. And one of the things I've done for years now is I mine the feedback that I get from people. I have an app on my phone, I have a Google form, and whenever I get positive feedback about me, I enter it in the moment. And
mm,
I go back and I look at moments when I feel low or moments when I'm uncertain to say, who am I? Because my mind can't
mm,
figure it out. Not completely, but the lens of other people that really know us is so pure. Now,
hmm.
that involves psychologically healthy people. That's not everyone. So we have to be judicious about where we take our feedback from. But let's
Yeah.
just say that's table stakes. But in terms of just practical tactics to go deeper, you had a phrase that you said that I think is so beautiful. What is it like to fill in the blank? Um, this curiosity, this loving curiosity, I think is the heart of it. And you can read about active listening, and it's pretty staid, it's pretty dry, but it's this heartfelt curiosity of tell me what it's like to deal with this struggle, this life event. I
Hmm.
think is so powerful and so easy to step into and so gratifying. A-
Hmm.
And I have a friend who has a neurodegenerative illness,
Mm,
and she got some recent bad news and horrible news. And I was able, and I can't help her. As a
mm,
man, I innately want to go to problem solving. I can't solve her problems.
hmm.
All I could do is say, what is it like to experience that? What does it feel
Mm,
like? And she
hmm.
said, Mike, I am terrified.
Mm,
And I stayed with it. And I said, my gosh, I really feel that. I really feel that. What is it like for you to feel terrified? What does that look like?
yeah.
And just that loving investment in someone else. And it's like kindling to me in a conversation. You could feel people warm up um,
Yeah.
when you give them this invitation to truly be seen. And
Yeah.
And there's a recent study that said the number one driver of relationship success was the ability to be seen. And I ask that question of people I coach and people in general, how many people in your life do you feel 100% seen by? And the answer for most people is zero.
Hmm.
And yet it's such a core human need.
Yes.
And and I think there are real challenges to navigate in finding that in a romantic relationship, to be honest. I think there are
Yes.
some that can get all the way there, but it's kind of a high wire act. You know, as a man, you want to project strength and you need to. Um, can you, be 1,000% vulnerable with a romantic partner that's dependent upon you as you navigate showing strength? It's a careful balance. But with platonic friendships, you can just let it go and say,
Yeah.
man, I'm really struggling. I'm really
Yeah.
feared up.
Yeah.
And boy, when one person goes to that level and creates that vibration, to reuse a term you used, it sets that vibration for the conversation, for the relationship.
Yes. Yes. It's so interesting because I really think, from a psychedelic men's leadership perspective, right? Like I think that this is a key element of every man's leadership journey, which is learning how to be a space holder, to be a
Mm,
compassionate space holder, a present, actively listening, compassionate space holder. Because ultimately, for your romantic partner, if you can hold that space for what she has gone through during the day without it hijacking you and triggering you, and then you becoming unable to hear her, listen to her, and see her,
mm,
then the intimate connection of the relationship, in my view, struggles because where the connection comes from and that leadership comes from is being, feeling, seen, and heard. It's, as you said, it's a witnessing. And it's a core human need, which I think in modern Western culture is elusive, which is how do I find people who see me? And so if you can't find it in, general society and at work with, less than optimal leaders who don't recognize, et cetera, let alone give the rewards for your hard work, then you get to this next level, which is, well, then at least my friends. Well, what if my friends can't? Then my partner. And so you like work your way down from the
mm.
social level right into this romantic truth, which is for that person that is the love of my life, or at least the love of right now, can I show up for them in a way that lets them really release and whatever is present on the mind or on the heart without becoming emotionally hijacked in the process. And I think that's where a lot of guys struggle right there is they hear something and they it starts becoming about their struggles when really their partner, their woman, whoever it may be, actually just needs a place to feel seen and heard.
Totally. And as men, we've heard this continually that don't problem solve, listen. And
Mm,
we're never trained how, and we have to experiment and
right.
learn those skills. And my own experience has been using platonic friendships as a safe space to start to build
Yep.
that muscle memory and then bringing into the relationship has been really helpful.
100%.
Some of the other things that you mentioned, at one point you mentioned waking up to your own power and your own self-love.
Yeah.
Those are two really, really powerful destinations, and you've had a lot of progression on that. In the diagnostic leading up to this podcast, you rated yourself as a 5 out of 5 on self-love, which places you in the top 20%. And the question I always like to ask is, have you always been that way?
No, is the short answer. I was seeking, and I think that this is the challenge that a lot of guys face. I was seeking power from the outside world. I was seeking love from the outside world. And when I learned how to love myself instead of seeking it from either the approval of my boss or from my partner, that's when I start, or the mother in my partner, or the father in my boss, so to speak, when I start to learn that and really truly love myself, I realize I don't need anyone to approve of me or to validate me as a person. I'm living my own unique signature of life here. And that has led that ability to love myself and know that I am learning in my journey. You know, there are areas of mastery that I have, and there are areas of just being a novice. And so, how do I walk through that path and just say, yeah, this is me. This is, and I don't need, and society has XYZ, definitions of what it means to be a success or what it means to be a man or what it means to be masculine, or any of these sorts of things. And it's like, you don't need anyone else's definitions. I have my own. And not caring about, some troll on the internet or something like that, which I think for a period of time, especially with my background, having been like, I was a student government president in high school and in college, so like very sensitive to the feedback of the masses. Um, and that's good on one hand, democratic leadership, lowercase d, and on the other hand, also being like, okay, we're not chasing the approval of the masses here. So where does that lead you? That leads you to being both compassionate and empathetic to what other people are, feeling, but also recognizing that your feelings come first. First and foremost, you come first.
Well, you said something that I think is vital, that I didn't need someone to validate me.
Yeah.
Easy to say, hard to feel, hard to have in your heart. How did you
Mhm.
get there? What allowed you to break that connection to the validation of others and learn to find it within? What made the difference for you?
That's a really interesting question. I think that there's a few different possible answers. I'm not sure if I'm clear on any one in particular. The first was, I think that I had relied on my mom for so long for that love that once she was gone, I had no choice
Okay.
but to learn it. Um, the second piece I'd say is, my first macrodosing experience with mushrooms had a sort of a major opening experience of like, you see that everything that you've gone through in the past is not fundamentally about you. The tough adversity that you face is not about you. You're not less than. So kind of waking up to this sort of voice of being like, no, I'm not less than anyone else because I don't have this title or I don't have this amount of money or I don't have, I'm not 6'4" or something like that, right? And then I think the third piece, frankly, was Christ consciousness, to be totally honest with you.
Can you
For
define
me,
Christ consciousness for the listener?
sure, love, accept, forgive yourself and others unconditionally. Be present, be patient, be kind, be compassionate, be generous. And for me, that vibration of those values in the present moment of dealing with what comes up has been pretty profound because when I talk about loving myself, it's generally in relation to a part that does not feel, and this is more related to like Dick Schwartz's internal family systems for
Yep, big
those that are
fan.
familiar, but like the part of myself that doesn't feel loved. Well, okay, so there's a part of you right now, Jesse, that is feeling, I don't know, insecure about your value on this podcast. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Like, and you have this internal dialogue or whatever it may be to be like, okay, I see you. Thank you for the concern. I forgive you. I love you. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. And you have this sort of inner father to inner child
Yep,
relationship
yep.
that is, it's almost a, I think a lot of psychologists would be against the idea of splitting the personality, but it is like the idea of splitting yourself and being like, I am the love and I love unconditionally the part of me that is in fear.
Yes.
And identifying with you as the present moment with Christ consciousness, with those higher vibrations and being like, oh, this insecurity that you're facing right now, that's just a fear that you have, probably from childhood, maybe even not even from your own life, maybe even from your parents or from your grandparents or something. So let's just love that, see that, and move on, right? Move forward in an integrated way.
And I think you gave such a beautiful description of the heart of internal family systems. So this was developed about 25 years ago by Richard Schwartz, as Jesse mentioned. It's an outgrowth of family systems therapy, which found that families are systems. When one member of the family is affected by something, it's like a mobile. Everyone is affected. Um, and the realization that we have these internal parts of us, and sometimes it's called parts therapy, is how I first heard about it,
Mhm.
and having a different relationship with these parts.
Yes.
And that's, 25-year-old vintage, but you can trace it back thousands of years, particularly the Hindu culture and wisdom tradition that is just like a love letter to the deep self, this
Mhm.
self that we have within that we can find in meditation. What is the voice that can see the thoughts, that can say, thought, go
Mhm.
away?
Mhm.
Thought, come back to center. That is one of the most vital questions. Who is that? What is that voice? And you,
Mhm.
describe that as the inner father. I love that. I think most people have heard of inner child, but there is a leader within us
Mhm.
that's in our heart, in our spirit, that we can
Mhm.
leverage in a really practical way.
Mhm.
And I think if you're struggling with trauma, and one sign of that is if you can't get things done that you know are important and you face a high level of resistance, there's something likely operating at a deeper level. And you did a beautiful job of describing just this dance of first awareness. We can't do a damn thing about anything if we're not first aware of it. So being able to have the distance to say, I see a part of me that's in fear. And then I want to go back to the friendship aspect about this curiosity, having this loving curiosity, not just for others, but for ourselves, saying, why are you here? First, and you said, first, it's thanking it. Thank you for being,
Mhm.
I know you're trying to protect me. As you said, it's probably an egoic strategy that was developed at some time in the past when it was vital to develop. And then it
Mhm.
stays there as a sentinel saying, I'm going to watch out for you. I'm going to look for this situation and I'm going to be on alert all the time so that we don't face that pain again. It's
Mhm.
just fascinating to me how sticky those parts of us are.
Yes.
And they don't go away. They can with certain types of therapy, but for the most part, they're here. And our
Right.
opportunities to develop a different relationship with them. And,
Right.
you talked about compassion, and you scored very high in compassion for yourself and compassion for others, 5 out of 5. And, I talk about compassion a lot on this podcast because I think it's absolutely a superpower. Both the Buddha and Jesus really taught about compassion as being fundamental. But this compassion for yourself and a really good way of thinking, I think, is to treat yourself as a trusted friend.
Yes.
In fact, all of these qualities we're talking about being curious and growth minded. You mentioned giving yourself the grace that I am learning. I'm a vector, I'm on a trajectory, and having love and compassion for the fact that you're on their journey.
Mhm.
People are just, we're beautifully broken.
Mhm.
All of us have trauma. All of
Mhm.
us have pain. There's an author and friend of mine, Kelly Flanagan, who said, I know you have pain. I don't know what it is, but I know because you're human, you have some.
Mhm.
Not only being able to recognize it and alleviate that pain, but sometimes stay in that pain
Yes.
and pain as a teacher and suffering as a teacher. And it took me a long time to get my head around this, and I'm still learning. In my past, and throughout my entire life, I refused to suffer or feel pain. And I would mask it with drugs or alcohol or sex or high adventure or high achievement or blasting at warp speed on a motorcycle around a racetrack, whatever it took to get that
Mhm.
voice out of my head. And I've had over the last year to really learn how to suffer and learn how
Mm.
to navigate pain. And we were talking about in the green room before, there's a two-step dance, and I think it'd be fun to talk about this. First of all, being able to enter into your pain, into your suffering, holding space for yourself, and then get the hell out of there. Um,
Yeah.
when you've found the riches and then not wallowing in it. And I'm just curious how you navigate that. How do you navigate the pain and the suffering and find the fruits? And then how do you release from it?
Yeah, I really I appreciate all that you just said there because I think that the we have to be, especially as men, we have to be conscious of the difference between, feeling your emotions and dwelling in them.
Sure.
And I think that there is a well-intended piece of, you know, armchair wisdom that floats around, which is like, oh no, feel your feelings. And yes, feel your feelings, but don't dwell there. And I think that that's, what I hear sometimes online is like, oh no, like it's important, like, but what happens is people start to identify with the feeling. It's a feeling,
Mm,
it's an emotion, it's not an identity. And so it's what is your subconscious trying to express and tell you? And we can learn a lot from Kubler-Ross and, 5 stages of grief, the Kubler-Ross grief cycle, right? Like if it's anger or sadness, you're grieving something. What is it that you are not accepting that you need to accept and move through that to accept it faster, right? Bargaining is also part of that, which can also be sometimes it can come across as overwhelm, right? So if you're overwhelmed, like, well, what is it that you need to accept? And in the process, come to clarity as to what you're doing to resolve this thing, this new reality, integrate this new truth into your life. So, I mean, that's an intellectual, approach to dealing with the emotions. But the deal is feel it. Oh, I'm feeling angry right now. Okay, well, I can do some somatic work and psychosomatic work and go hit the punching bag, you know, or I can feel I'm overwhelmed right now. You know what? I just need to honor this moment and just go step outside and take a few breaths and maybe sit in
mm.
the grass for a little while and do some deep breathing,
Yep.
or I'm really sad. Okay, I need to cry it out. There's a part of me that needs to cry this out and let it go. So, really being aware of what it is that is coming up and honoring it rather than escaping from it or running away from it, which is, I'm just
Yes.
like you, have that history of like, oh, I used to, you know, substances, for example, and just let me paper over this with that. But that's not actually the root resolution. So the root resolution ends up being, okay, I'm aware that I'm feeling this. I'm aware that I'm angry. Let me honor this. Now, let me both approach this from giving my body a physical way to express this anger in a constructive, not a destructive way. And then also let me come to terms with what actions do I need to take to resolve the thing that I have just come to acceptance of. Like, okay, I go and hit the bag, but I'm angry about what? I'm angry about the fact that, that my lunch is late. So what am I going to do about that? Well, we just accept it, right? Whatever it is, right? Like, and we either can do something about it, like, okay, we're not going to order from that restaurant again. Okay, now we know we've learned through this process, or there's simply an acceptance of like sometimes things are within your control, Jesse, and sometimes they're not. And this is one of those moments where we've now learned that this is not within our control and there's nothing that we could really do about it any differently in the future, or there is, and we lean into the learning.
You know, learning just strikes me as is kind of a wimpy word to describe what we're really talking about, which is this really full-throated and expansive and loving pursuit of growth and
Yes.
seeing everything as a learning opportunity, the good things and the bad things, but realizing that we're on a journey and a learning journey. And I think of an old line from Heraclitus, who was a pre-Socratic philosopher, who said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice because it's
Mm,
not the same river and he's not the
right.
same man."
Right.
Well, the river's constantly changing and we're constantly changing.
Right.
When I screw up, when I'm not skillful, when I don't navigate something well, we can, most of us can rely on our inner critic to be all over that and really, parse that and say, "Oh, how could you?" and "You did this," etc. It can be difficult to navigate in the moment, but your chances of repeating that same mistake for most people are dramatically less. I'm
Right.
not going to go there again. Well, giving yourself the grace and the credit to know that the river has changed and so have I. And I really have to repeat that to myself. We were both in the corporate world, we both were in change, we were both in leadership, and we both took a lot of swings at the plate. And in that environment, you end up with a lot of successes and a lot of failures.
Yes.
And those failures, it was once said that failure is like Velcro and success is like Teflon.
Hmm.
That the successes, they feel good in the moment, but over time they're hard to lock into and feel. But man, those failures, they're right there. And to be able to have the grace to say, I have changed and I am a different person,
Hmm.
I think is so vital. You said it's a feeling, not an identity. Um,
Hmm.
so powerful and so hard to do. I also just want to here's my public service announcement of a beautiful thing. You mentioned Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So she was a psychiatrist, developed, the levels of grief that have helped a lot of people navigate grief. Well, she has this beautiful conception around how people develop that I'm going to read because I think it just needs to be heard as much as possible. She said, the most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These people have an appreciation and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen.
Hmm.
So, defeat, suffering, struggle, loss, this is the human condition. But
Yeah.
finding our way out of those depths, one of the gifts is compassion for those that are going through that.
Hmm.
There's a great conception of Rory Vaden. We're best positioned to help the person we used to be. For you, being able to talk to a 12-year-old who now knows that their parent is going to die, your path makes you so powerful to help people. That compassion, that gentleness that comes from your suffering is such a gift that you can give to others.
Thank you.
So, one of the other things you mentioned about waking up was self-love, but also to your own power. And
Hmm.
this is vitally important. In all the research I've done, achievement, goals, mission, purpose are essential. We are mission creatures. Rumi said the desire to work has been put in every human heart. And he was a poet, talking about work. And one of the things that hit me out of your diagnostic was you have a very clear sense of mission, a 5 out of 5. Again, puts you in the top 20%. People would kill for that clarity, by the way. I work with a lot of people that are looking for that sense of mission, something that's pulling them. Um, so I want to dig into that first. What is your mission, and or how did you find your mission?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I would say that my mission really comes down to helping people access their inner power and evolve their consciousness. I
Okay.
feel very, very passionate about helping people come to their highest potential, which often involves learning how to let go of the past.
Mm,
Because as I'll tell clients, this moment, this now moment in which I'm speaking and you're listening, this is the only thing that's real. And so the question is, what from before now, the past, is affecting your ability to actually go and create your future? And I think that for me, that's an area that is obviously it's very much related to seeking happiness and seeking joy and achieving and experiencing it because it's like what you're in your past life you've learned through failure of what not to do, and it has led you exactly to the hell loop that you're in right now. So where do we start to generate a change in our own development journey, our own growth journey, so that we can start to make different decisions in the present moment that reflect building the life that we actually want to live. Because that, I think, is where this ultimately comes all down to the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is, are you living the life that you want to be living? And if you're
Yep.
not, what are you doing about it?
Yep. Yep.
You know? And then this way you get onto this path of saying, okay, now I'm just in the process of building my life. Okay, so we're out of the mindset of feeling stuck or trapped. May need to learn patience, which is in most of those native indigenous medicine wheels. As patience ends up being, a season that we all go through in our leadership journey of just like, okay, we're working here, we're building it. It takes time. Things are not necessarily happening as fast as we'd like them to happen, but we
Yep.
are on the right path. We are on the right path. We're on the journey that, like, yes, this is fulfilling for me. This makes me feel good. I can, sustain my life and my lifestyle from this, this work and this approach. And then you look into the mirror every day and you go, okay, did I get as much as I wanted done? Maybe not. Maybe I did. But either way, I'm moving the ball forward on that path, which leads me, proverbially speaking, to the promised land. Well, we're already in the promised land just by working on the path that is aligned with our highest mission of why we're here. And that I think is fun work. And I know that you do this work with your clients. It's just like getting into connection with what is it that I really want to do? What is the alchemy of my life experiences that prepares me to then go forward in life and being like, I may not be making the most amount of money that I want to be making, but over time, building this and making this happen, this is why I'm here. And that
Yes.
feels good.
Absolutely. And some of the most powerful, long-lasting missions and sense of purpose are in service.
Yeah.
And the Bhagavad Gita, Hindu wisdom tradition, said that selfless service is the supreme goal of life.
Yes.
And I toggle a bit on selfless. We need to make a living. There's value for money. That's part of the equation, but still that orientation towards, how do I give? How do I serve? And we talked in the green room about the paucity of that, the lack of that in most corporate environments, the danger of being a compassionate listener, and yet it's entirely possible. I think being on the other side of that, I would love to go back into corporate roles with the sensibility I have now of
Mm,
everyone has a genius. As you said, it's from their experiences, from their genetic blueprint. What is their genius, and how do I draw it forth, and how do I make it safe for it to flower? Um, Boy, I wish I had that sensibility. Um,
yeah.
and just for fun, let's talk about purpose. Let's talk about finding mission. So, for some lucky people, it just materializes. Ding, I have it. Um, most of us have to work harder. And Parker Palmer, the Christian author, had a beautiful conception of this. He said, I understood mission and vocation. So, vocation, typically in a religious term, I have a vocation to be a priest, but it could be a vocation to be a lawyer or a doctor. He said, I understood vocation wrong throughout my entire life. I thought that it was a voice, an external voice, saying, you need to do this to be successful. And now I understand it to be an internal voice that says, I cannot not do this thing, something
Hmm.
that's pulling us. It's beautiful when you can find it. It could take a long, and there are seasons of it. Sometimes it's not
Hmm.
here. And to have grace for those seasons and say, okay, what's, as AA would say, what's the next right step? What are experiments that I can do to move in that direction, or connections I can form, or learning I can do? Just having grace with ourselves. But I'm curious, your sense of finding mission and purpose. One framework that I really love is a three-part question. It's first, who do I serve? Who's my target? So for you as a psychedelic coach, you focus on men. And I'm sure the avatar gets richer from there, men that are experiencing, life transitions or corporate challenges or what have you. So who do I serve and being really specific on that. The second framer I love is what is the pain that they're experiencing? And I'm reminded of an old venture capitalist I work with. He said, I don't invest in vitamins, I invest in painkillers. If you can tap into the pain of those that you serve and really feel that, if you can convey that pain, people assume you have a solution. If you have the fidelity to say, for you, you may feel like X. And so a simple process for the people I serve, what are all the pain points they're going through? And that can be in any walk of life. That can be, I am the manager of a Chick-fil-A, which by the way, it's harder to get into Chick-fil-A management than Harvard. Very talented group of people. What's the pain
Mhm.
that people experience trying to get a chicken sandwich at rush hour when there's, 8 million people in line? Um, so really feeling that pain. And then the third part of the question is, what is the solution that I provide that alleviates that pain?
Right.
So to me, that can be a really powerful formation of a mission or a purpose statement. Who do I serve? On a very human level, what are they experiencing? What are their pain? And how do I alleviate that pain? Knit that together into a sentence. I serve people who experience X pain through Y solution. So that's been a helpful framer for me. I'm just wondering your experience personally or working with people, any hints on how people can find their purpose or mission from your perspective?
Yeah, there's a number of thoughts that are being triggered by that, but I think that really doing story work and understanding your own story and
Mm,
where was the yeah, what's the word? Where you're the crux. What's the crux of the story, right? Where is it the inflection point? That's the word I'm looking for, the inflection point. Where is it that everything changed? What is it the thing that either you hit your rock bottom or you hit the wall? Like, what is that story? And then recognizing from there, how does this then lead into the skill set that I have, the human skill set that I have, to how I want to go forward with the rest of my life. Because to me, this is, and I'll just use the phrase spiritual awakening. It could also be called a midlife crisis. There is this moment where you get to, which is like the path that I was walking is not the path for me. And so
mm,
that just awakening there to that is part of your purpose, in my view, right? Because it's like for me, for example, like corporate was not working for me. Corporate was not working for me. I lost a loved one. After I lost a loved one, I realized that corporate was not working for me. And then I decided to go and focus on the work that I do now in terms of psychedelic men's leadership, et cetera, because I realized that that path right there, there's a transition point. And it is not the snap of a finger. It is something that you're walking through, ideally with the help of a coach, a mentor, a therapist, a psychologist. You're going through this journey of changing from one story of who you are and what you're doing with your life and how you are being in the world to a new story that is aligned with what does it mean to live in spiritual terms, my heaven on earth? What gives me this story of the locus of control, sovereignty, right? Where I'm the sovereign master of my world. And that doesn't necessarily mean entrepreneurship, although it might, right? It also means just being in that place where, okay, I am fully in containment in connection with my own inner community, my own inner family, my own inner parts. And I'm able to then show up in the world in this way that is compassion, that is understanding, and through whatever it is. Maybe you want to sell surfboards and sell hot dogs down at the boardwalk for the rest of your life, right? Like and if that's the way that you bring your value forward of being this person who lives in joy and has freedom and models it for other people about what's possible, for example, outside of corporate life, that's your work, right? That gives you
yeah,
the path forward. So it's really about like, well, what really turns you on and really makes you feel like, damn, that feels good. That feels really good. I could do that all day. I like
right,
that. It's
right.
not easy work, but God, is it rewarding? And that right there to me is like that's that alchemy of what
Yeah,
we're looking for and being aligned with purpose.
absolutely. And I think, if you're selling surfboards in Huntington Beach and that's your calling, um, that is worthy of the highest regard.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
think of my travels to Japan, and someone mentioned to me, everyone in Japan has such dignity that they bring to their work. And I'd heard that, and then I was walking along the street, and I saw an old gentleman, probably about 80 years old, and he was sweeping the street, and he had what I'll call the third world broom, which is a bunch of twigs that were
Yeah.
put together and tied
Yep.
with another twig.
Yep.
Why he was doing that in Japan, one of the most advanced societies on earth, I don't know. But anyway, that's what he was doing.
Mhm.
He had so much dignity. He
Yes.
he could have been the CEO or the president. He had found how he served, and he
Hmm.
found dignity, and he found love. Any job doing is worth doing well. And I remember that man. Um,
Right.
the other thing you talked about that I really love is purpose can be transitional. It can be the path of finding purpose can be your purpose. And it could,
Yes.
and that can be absolutely okay.
Yes.
And to have it with grace and curiosity and love, and not to beat the hell out of yourself of, I don't have a galvanic purpose. Maybe it's not the season for it, but it's always the season to, as you said before, to look at ourselves with compassion, with grace, with love, with a sense that we're
Hmm.
learning, that we're growing. Now, this all feels like, butterflies and daisies, right? Um, One of the things that fascinates me is this tension between fulfillment and grace and acceptance and achievement and the drive to get shit done and to change the world and to serve
Mm.
others. It's a really interesting duality to me. Can we live in both places at the same time, to be
Hmm.
relaxed and peaceful and poised and be ripping the cover off the ball?
Hmm.
And there are some people that have managed both. It's a very small Venn intersection. The Buddha found serenity, found peace, found contentment, and then he went and kicked ass and
Yep.
ordained thousands of monks and created a worldwide movement that has helped millions of people. Um, Michael Singer, for those familiar with him, the untethered soul guy, surrendered his way to $1 billion net worth. But beyond that, it's hard to find examples of people who really live in peace and contentment and grace and also live in high achievement. We're more familiar with the Steve Jobs, who
Hmm.
left an indelible mark, but by most accounts did not live in peace, did not live in real service and love. And Western society prizes that achievement more than the internal work, that's
Right.
less showy, that's less visible, right? So for me, at least in my current state of development, there are two powerful states. There is a time and a place and a state for me to be grateful and content and loving and in peace. And there's a time to say, from that foundation, now I'm going to step into my gifts and I'm going to step to the plate and I'm going to rocket that ball into center field and this over the center field fence. And then when that gets too heady, too turbulent, I have a place to go back to really take sense of where I am now and be grateful and be compassionate. So that's how I work with it now is two very powerful states. At a neuroanatomic level, the reality is we don't multitask, we single thread. There's only one thought that's going through at one time. We rapidly switch, but it's really one thought at one time. So for
Yeah.
me, at least that's where I land is we've talked a lot about, these softer aspects of it, but you're a high achiever. You'll continue to be a high achiever. Um, but what I hear in your journey and from knowing you is that, and it showed up in your diagnostic, there is a grace and a gentleness and a self-love that's palpable. Um, that you can now align with what I've always known you to have when we worked together, which was drive and intellect and determination. So I think the marriage of those two is fascinating, and how they and the dance of them together, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
And
Yeah,
let's
sounds
unless you
good.
wanted to unless you wanted to comment on my big spew there about, this dance between achievement and grace.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that it really is becoming consciously aware that there are times of contraction and there are times of expansion. And it comes back to the growth and the learning piece and the integration piece, which is, there is a moment here, on this journey where, if we're going through and you find through this expansion and this contraction, eventually you will align with this path where you can take the right brain and the left brain and bring them together, and or heart and mind and bring it together, same thing said differently. And I think that that's where we want to be, because burnout really is the corporate thing, for example, is really about going on the mind side for so long that
Yep.
eventually your heart's not in it.
Yeah.
And there's a whole rabbit hole that we could go into in terms of leadership and shared values and crafting the right culture and all this sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, if the heart's not part of the equation, the heart doesn't feel part of the equation, then there's just this disconnect. And eventually you will run out of steam. And so,
Yep.
if you can reach someone before they've hit that wall, and you can help someone make the transition where it's like, okay, you still got a great income, you still got a great career, but let's start to explore where your true heart's desires lie, where they are. Let's go and follow that and unpack that a little bit. Then you can enter a new space of expansion and growth that's in service to yourself and to your own
Mhm.
dreams, rather than building someone else's, which I think is very exciting.
Very exciting indeed, and a good place for us to stop for today. We could talk for a long time, my friend. Um,
Yes.
lot of hard-earned wisdom here. You're on a path that's really inspiring to watch. It inspires me. It's been an honor to have you as a friend. It's been an honor to have you on the podcast.
Feelings
And
mutual. Thank you.
thank you so much for today, and thank you everyone for listening, and have a fantastic day.